What if the pain of your beginning tried to define the rest of your life? What if even your name carried the weight of sorrow? In the Bible, there was a man named Jabez, born in grief and marked by pain, but he refused to remain under the shadow of his past. With one heartfelt cry to the God of Israel, Jabez asked for blessing, increase, protection, and God's hand upon his life, and the Lord answered him. This is the story of Jabez, a story of pain, prayer, and divine transformation. 1 Chronicles chapter 4, verse 9 to 10.
In the hill country of Judah, where the wind moved gently through the olive trees and the sun stretched its golden light across the fields, there lived a woman who carried a deep sorrow in her heart. When the time came for her child to be born, the pain was heavier than she had ever known. The night was long. The cries in her house were filled with anguish. Women gathered to help her, whispering prayers under their breath, while oil lamps flickered against the stone walls. At last, when the child was born, she held him close, exhausted and trembling. She looked down at his tiny face, and instead of joy alone, tears filled her eyes.
"I bore him in pain,"
she whispered, and so she gave him the name Jabez. In her tongue, the name carried the memory of sorrow. As the boy grew, he came to understand what his name meant. Children sometimes spoke it carelessly, but to Jabez it always felt heavier than it sounded. Every time he heard it, it was as though the shadow of his beginning followed him. His name reminded people of pain. It reminded his mother of suffering. And perhaps at times it even reminded Jabez of a question he did not know how to answer. Why had sorrow been written over his life from the start? Yet Jabez was not like many others around him. Though he lived among his brothers and kinsmen, there was something different about him. He did not become hard because of pain. He did not grow bitter because of what he carried. Instead, sorrow made him thoughtful. Trouble made him humble. He listened more than he spoke. He watched the ways of men and saw how pride destroyed some, how foolishness trapped others, and how the fear of the Lord gave wisdom to the righteous. As he grew into manhood, people began to notice that Jabez was honorable. He dealt fairly with others. He spoke with care. He worked diligently. He did not mock the weak or flatter the strong. While others sought to make a name for themselves through force or wealth, Jabez quietly built a life marked by integrity. Still, deep inside him, there remained a longing. He had fields to tend, duties to carry, and responsibilities like any other man. But sometimes, when the day was done and the sky burned red with sunset, Jabez would stand alone and look toward the distant hills. In those quiet moments, he felt that his life was meant for more than merely carrying the label of sorrow. He believed the God of Israel was greater than the pain of his birth. He believed the Lord could change what men assumed could never change. One evening, after a season of hardship had passed through the land, Jabez withdrew to pray. The fields had been difficult. The future felt narrow. Dangers rose on every side. There were threats from enemies, burdens from labor, and fears hidden in the heart. Jabez knew that no man could secure his own future by strength alone. If his life was to become anything more than the grief tied to his name, the Lord himself would have to intervene. So Jabez lifted his voice to the God of Israel. He did not speak with pride. He did not come with empty words. He prayed as a man who knew both his weakness and God's greatness.
"O Lord,"
he cried,
"that you would bless me indeed."
The words rose from the deepest part of him. He was not asking for small comfort. He was asking for the true blessing of God, the kind of blessing that changes the course of a life. He continued,
"And enlarge my territory."
Jabez had known narrowness all his life. He had lived under the weight of limitation, under the memory of sorrow. under the quiet fear that perhaps his life would never rise beyond its beginning. But now he asked boldly for increase. He asked God to widen the borders of his life, to open doors no man could open, to give him room to grow, room to thrive, room to become all that God intended. Then he prayed,
Let your hand be with me.
Jabez understood that blessing without God's presence would be empty. If his land increased but the Lord was absent, it would be no blessing at all. He wanted more than success. He wanted the hand of God to guide him, protect him, strengthen him, and remain upon him. Finally, with a voice softened by the memory of all he had carried, he prayed,
Keep me from evil that I may not cause pain.
This was no ordinary request. It was as though Jabez was standing before God and saying, Do not let sorrow have the final word in my life. Do not let evil shape my future. Do not let the pain that marked my beginning become the pain that defines my end. Then silence settled around him. The wind moved through the grass. The evening deepened. The stars slowly appeared above him, bright and countless in the heavens of Judah. Jabez rose from prayer, changed, though nothing around him seemed different yet. The fields were still the same. The hills were still the same. The world had not shifted in a single moment, but in his heart there was a quiet confidence. He had called upon the God of Israel, and he believed that God had heard him. In the days that followed, the blessing of the Lord began to rest upon Jabez. His land prospered. What had once seemed too small began to increase. Boundaries widened. Opportunities came. The work of his hands was established. Where there had once been struggle, there was fruitfulness. Where there had once been limitation, there was room. But even more than this, the hand of God was clearly with him. He was preserved in times of danger. He was given wisdom in times of decision. He was strengthened when burdens were heavy. Trouble did not swallow him. Evil did not master him. The grief that might have ruled his life did not overcome him. And the people around him saw it. Jabez became known not simply for his beginnings, but for his character and his prayer. Men spoke of him with respect. They said he was more honorable than his brothers. Not because he had never suffered, but because he had carried suffering differently. He had refused to let pain turn him cruel. He had refused to let hardship turn him faithless. Instead, he brought his deepest ache before God, and God answered him. And so the memory of Jabez lived on among the people, not as a man trapped by the meaning of his name, not as a man conquered by grief, but as a man who cried out to God and was heard. His story became a quiet witness from generation to generation, that a painful beginning does not have to become a permanent destiny, that the Lord is able to bless beyond what men expect, that God can enlarge what seems too small, that his hand can rest upon a life and guide it safely, and that evil and sorrow do not have the final word when a person calls upon the living God. Though only a few lines of scripture record his life, the meaning of his story stretches far beyond them. For Jabez teaches us that a person may be born in pain and still walk into purpose. A person may begin under sorrow and still end under blessing. A name given by men may speak one thing, but the favor of God can speak another. Jabez's story could be our story too. Our beginning may be painful. We might be called a name that bears sorrow, or our situation may seem difficult. But just like Jabez, if we come to the Lord in true sincerity of heart, God is able to change our story and transform our situation.